No problem.
Okay.
Give me about 2 minutes and we're going to get rolling here, everybody. Give me a
All
moment.
right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Rodova. All right. Thanks.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Sorry, I had to step away for a second. I'm going to call the roll and just see who we have here. So please respond. If I don't hear you, I will move on and I'll come back around. But if you do hear me, please say here. Desmond Atkins. Julia Boyd. Janet Collins. Alan Gerber.
Here.
Thank you. Karen Gray. Saskia Hagans.
Present.
Thank you. Igenie Harris Blenman.
Present.
Thank you. Colin Jakubczyk.
Present.
Thank you. Jennifer Jordan.
Here.
Thank you. Zerzima Jordan.
Yeah.
Regina Kinsey. Peter Crashes.
Present.
Thank you. Francis Langley.
Yeah.
Thank you. William Meehan is excused. Fior Ortiz Joyner. Celeste Stern. Harry Tan.
Present.
Thank you. Mark Thurton.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ethel Tias. Yrsa Weatherspoon. Robert Witherwax present. Deborah Young. All right, we still need one more person for a quorum, but that's no reason why we can't get started. And here's some of the presenters. Good evening.
Can you add my name too, Mr.? Can you add my name, Charles East?
Mr. East, you're marked as a guest, but you're not a member of the committee. So no worries there.
Right,
I've got you
All right,
present.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening. My name is Robert Witherwax. I am the chair of the Community Board 8 Environment, Sanitation, and Transportation Committee. We meet 6 or 7 times during the board year, and this is our first meeting of the board year here in September. Like school, community board starts in September and we end like school in June. We try to take the summer off. It doesn't always work that way. So welcome. We've got a few new members with us today. And at one point this evening, I want to sort of go around the Zoom room and everyone introduce each other to each other, because it's been a long time since we've been in the same physical room as each other. But I do not want to delay tonight's agenda. We have two special guests with us tonight. The first, I hope you all got the agenda, which is circulated by the board. First is a proposed co-naming of the corner of New York Avenue and Prospect Place in honor of Kevin Alves. And the second is a presentation from DOT's Public Space Unit. Kyle Gorman and friends will provide an update on the traffic ramifications of the design, current design status for the proposals for Underhill Avenue. So I would like to begin by calling the meeting to order and going into our first agenda item, the co-naming. So just for a refresher, because again, we have some new members of the committee. We don't do this all the time. We had a couple last year. Community Board 8 has adopted some guidelines for the proposals of co-naming. I hope, and I know that we have some of our the applicants for Mr. Alves' co-naming here with us tonight. I hope these were communicated to them in advance of their submission. So first of all, Community Board 8 will propose the co-naming of streets for the following types of honorees: individuals who are Community Board 8 residents, natives, or of particular importance to Community Board 8, whose life story, deeds, or acts are of enduring interest to large segments of Community Board 8's population. The approval will follow these steps. There'll be an initial application. The applicants must provide information to the district office, such as the applicant's information, who is making this application, name, contact information, follow-up, a written description of the honoree, explaining why the honoree is worthy of commemoration and the honoree's connection to CB8, and the proposed location of the street co-naming. Again, we're looking at Prospect and New York. There will be an initial review, which will happen in advance of tonight and tonight, right? So we will look at these items, and if they pass muster, if what we've asked for is there, we'll give you a return date. And at the return date, which will probably be in October, you have to come back with a couple of things: proof of notice to all residences and businesses within a reasonable distance of the proposed location, with a notice that will contain all the information necessary, a petition of support, some of which has been already included in the packet, and then some additional documentation. Give me one moment. I'm sorry, this is my 16-year-old son calling and he needs help. So I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Fernandez. If you would please take it away and explain Mr. Alves for us. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Evening.
Good evening.
I'm sorry. My name is Eileen Fernandez. I'm the former fiance of Kevin Alves. I just need a moment.
You got this.
My reasoning for seeking this co-naming for Kevin is deeper than my emotions and my grief. It's because of the impact that Kevin has made in the community, the lives he has touched and is still touching. From children to the elderly to the unsheltered individual. Kevin has navigated challenges with every individual. He has imparted daily kindness in their lives. I am also seeking this for my children to have an everlasting memory of Kevin, just like those in the community had. Kevin showed a small act of kindness with everyone in the community. Everyone was able to seek his advice. Kevin helped all children navigate challenges through school, through nonviolent solutions, daily affirmations, and just encourage them to be their best selves. I am also seeking this as an inheritance to our family, our children, the community, and generations to come, so that one day Kevin and our grandchildren can look up and say, "A job well done, Grandpa." To the community Board 8, I just want to thank you all for this time. To Julia, I don't know if she's here, but for her kindness, her patience, and just supporting me throughout this whole entire process. I'm not sure if anyone on here from the community is able to speak, but I know a few individuals told me they would like to speak, and some of them are here tonight.
If anybody would like to say a few words about Mr. Alves, either raise your digital hands or just unmute and fire away.
I will go first. I joined by phone. My name is Samantha Ben. I'm Kevin Al's oldest sister. I didn't think I was going to get choked up. My brother was an amazing person, not just because he was my brother, because we all know siblings can be annoying. But my brother touched so many lives that I was truly amazed to see all of the people that came out and showed support for him and that's still showing support to our family today. And I'm really proud of my sister-in-law and what she's doing. It's just hard to speak on this because it's still really hard for all of us involved. But I agree with my sister-in-law, everything that she has said, and I'm supporting her 100%, and I hope that you guys would see what it is that she's saying and approve this to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to say a few words? Well, on behalf of the community board, we'd like to extend our condolences for your loss. This is a terrible plague, gun violence that hits not only this community but all too many communities across New York City and this country. And it's not like there isn't anything we can do to stop it, and we just need to get the will to stop it. But we can do our part, I think, by erecting memorials to the unfortunate victims and their families, so that, as you say, people can walk down the block and say, I wonder why. And somewhere there'll be a story to be told. We see these names in our communities, and they're in this day and age of the smartphone. You just plug in a few Google terms. It's like, oh, that's who that person was. That's why that person has a memorial up there. Sometimes they're good reasons. Sometimes they're bad reasons. But it's that's why we do that. So I want to thank you for coming out to us tonight. So as I said before, tonight is about initial review of the application. So I just want to spend a few minutes going through what you submitted, and then we'll calendar you guys. We'll take a motion to calendar you for the upcoming meeting. I'm not going to read through the 30 pages of information that you submitted, which was wonderful to read through in advance of this meeting. The application, a biography, and then several letters. I lost count about how many letters from people who knew and loved Kevin in a multitude of capacities: professional, personal, community, who had known him from the Parks Department, from the hospital, who had known him for through all of his various ways around. So I encourage the committee to please do, if you haven't already, read through those dozen, at least, letters that are included. There is a petition. You did have a petition that we, the residents of 170 New York Avenue and Prospect Place, agree to the co-naming of Kevin D. Alves, which is great. And it's got what we need, which is names, addresses, and signatures. And we're going to go through this and see, plot them and make sure that it's not a majority. We're not looking for any particular number, but we want to make sure that this doesn't surprise people, right? That they understand what's going on when the sign is unveiled above their corner. They know it was coming, right? That's what it's our job, is to make sure that the community is engaged in that. So, I mean, lost count of how many signatures there are, but there are quite a few. So I want to thank you once again for coming before us tonight with that. I will ask my members of the committee for a motion to advance this application. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Jakubczyk, thank you very much for making the motion to advance the application for a vote in October. Do we have a second on the motion?
Second.
Is that Mr. Gerber? Excellent. Mr. Jakubczyk makes the motion. Mr. Gerber advances it, seconds it rather. Any opposition to the motion? Hearing none, we'll take it, since it's procedural, we'll take it as affirmed by the committee. We will be in touch between now and October. And just for the everyone's information, the October date is, bear with me, October 25th.
Thank you.
We'll have you back here by then for a formal vote by the committee. And in the meantime, please do reach back out to Julia, and she and I and you and I will work together for what else we need to fill in the gaps if there are any in the application. So thank you, Ms. Fernandez.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Appreciate yours. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Have a good night. All right. Item number 2 on the agenda. Department of Transportation coming to talk about Underhill Avenue. Kyle, Emily, which one of you am I tossing this to?
You can start it with me first. I'm going to kick
Kyle
us off.
Gorman, go right ahead.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having us tonight. I'm Kyle from the city's DOT Public Space. I'm joined by Emily Weidenhoff, also from Public Space, as well as Lee Eastman, who's from the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner's Office, here to talk to you tonight all about Prospect Heights open streets. So I'm going to share my screen quickly. All right, everyone should see a presentation. Full disclosure, sometimes my computer is a little finicky with WebEx, but please let me know if there's any issues with the screen share. So tonight we're here to really continue the conversation about the open streets in Prospect Heights. We're going to kick us off by just sort of highlighting all of the outreach efforts that have been executed really since the program began in 2020. Then we'll touch on actually a quick project update for Vanderbilt. Then we'll move on to Underhill. And finally, we'll touch on next steps and what is planned for 2023. So just quickly, as a little bit of a reminder for anyone who isn't aware, we work in close coordination with our community partner on the execution of the open streets here in Prospect Heights. Whoever's listening to Jeopardy or something, it sounds like, could you please mute? So we work in close coordination with, like I said, the community partner, the Prospect Heights Neighborhood Development Council, to execute open streets in Prospect Heights. They are a nonprofit organization that consists of neighbors, businesses, and other types of stakeholders working together collaboratively to create public space through DOT's Open Streets program. There are two types of open streets in the neighborhood. On Underhill Avenue is the limited local access type of open street, which currently operates Monday through Friday. It's a street that still allows for limited vehicle access, local pickups, drop-offs, emergency vehicles at all times, but is really designated as a bike and pedestrian priority corridor. This runs currently between St. John's Place and Atlantic Avenue. The other type of open street we have here in the community is the full closure found on Vanderbilt Avenue, which is in effect on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. This is when the street is fully closed to all vehicles, parked cars, the bus, and really allows for a vibrant sort of new type of activation with outdoor dining, programming, activities, performances, and everything in between, and really has become kind of the front yard of the neighborhood over the last few years. So now moving on to just some more of the outreach items and where things stand on that front. Like I said, we've been doing open streets here since 2020. Open Streets really has presented quite a fabulous sort of venue and conduit for us to conduct community outreach as we, really come together to shape the public realm and transportation vision for the neighborhood. We first started by launching a community feedback survey in the winter and spring of 2021, heard from nearly 1,500 individuals about, their thoughts on open streets, how things were going, and what they'd like to see these corridors used for in the future. While all of this has been going on since spring 2021, we've also simultaneously been doing a lot of data analysis and data collection on sort of how open streets is impacting and influencing the traffic network. So at strategic locations throughout the neighborhood, we've been collecting bike, pedestrian, and vehicle count data for open streets and surrounding corridors. That not only just sort of just gives us a better picture of how things are operating with open streets, but also really is a huge component of some of the project proposals that we're going to be talking about tonight and that we had actually previously presented back in the summer. We did 2 series of workshops in the fall of 2021 and spring 2022, sort of really just building blocks of the foundation, each step along the way, just of this community outreach to really better understand how people want to see these corridors evolve. So in fall 2021, we were, sort of just building on the feedback that we heard in the survey, trying to understand more of the direction that people want us to go. And then back in the spring of this year, the goal was to present a little bit more of a tangible, high-level concept and design solution for the future vision or future development of these corridors. And that is what we had recently presented to the committee here back in the end of June 2022, so just a few months ago. Briefly, I'm just going to go quickly through this. This is all information that we've presented publicly before. It can all be found on our website, and of course, this deck will be posted on our website as well. In the survey from 2021, we saw strong support to see the evolution of these corridors, to see permanent changes to make them bike and pedestrian priority corridors, and when they're designated as so, that really can result in a lot of different transportation and public realm benefits, such as supporting local businesses, different types of programming, safer trips by walking and biking, so on and so forth. Then in the fall, like I had mentioned earlier, we really wanted to build on the feedback that we received through the survey and kind of wanted to gauge the direction that people wanted to see these corridors evolve. And truth be told, people ask for a lot, and that is really great because we have a huge toolkit within the DOT public space toolkit, as well as the wider just Department of Transportation toolkit to really make these bike and pedestrian corridors through a series of dynamic design interventions that are strategically implemented throughout the neighborhood. And then in the spring of this year, back in May, is when we actually presented these concepts at a little bit more of a high level to the public at a series of workshops on Underhill and Vanderbilt Ave open streets. Really strong feedback generally across the board from the towards the positive evolution of these corridors and design solutions that codify bike and pedestrian priority while balancing sort of the day-to-day operations that make our city run, making sure that we have necessary loading and delivery space, designing, of course, for more formal infrastructure that really better aligns with the outcomes that we're looking to achieve through open streets as a gateway towards permanently changing the public realm. And that really influenced what we were able to present to the community board back in June, and we're going to touch on that in just a second. So just quickly highlighting the last thing before I hand it over to Emily to talk through some design items is that, we are still very much in the sort of goal of making Vision Zero a primary sort of goal of ours within the Department of Transportation. Both Underhill and Vanderbilt Avenue actually fall within a Vision Zero priority area, as well as some intersections along both corridors are identified as Vision Zero priority intersections. So from that perspective, which at its foundation is the safety of all road users, any age and ability, we really want to make sure that first and foremost, we are not only, of course, delivering all of these amazing transportation and public realm benefits, but also making sure that we are designing our streets to be the safest for all types of users. On Underhill Avenue, there's been a number of crashes over the years with a KSI of 5.1 per mile. KSI is killed or severely injured. This is a data point that we calculate looking at how many people are killed or severely injured along given stretches of a corridor. The higher the number, the more people who are unfortunately killed or severely injured and become a higher priority for us. So you see Comparatively, on Vanderbilt, it is a much higher KSI than Underhill and actually falls within the top 10% of all of Brooklyn. So there really is a huge need to make our streets safer. And with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Emily to talk through some of the great design work that we've put together. So Emily, take it away.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Kyle, and good evening, everyone. I think the first big piece of news and update to our proposal is just to share that we do have some delays, and I'll talk about the impacts to the timeline as we go through the project. But overall, if you recall, we're really looking to think about the two open streets along Vanderbilt and Underhill as a part of the larger network and as a pair, and trying to design them so they both support the different types of uses that we've seen be so successful on the corridor. So the first proposal of Vanderbilt is really about supporting the pedestrian and cycling amenities and the full closures on the space. And the Underhill portion of the project is really focused on creating a bike boulevard while still allowing local vehicles to circulate through the district. As you all know, there is some construction work along the Vanderbilt corridor, which is going to impact some of what we're able to implement this year, but also due to a backlog of projects from COVID, as well as challenges with our contracts and supply chain issues, we do need to implement a smaller scope of projects this year. So if we go to the next slide, we'll show you that the goal of the project and the design is still the same, really trying to create gateways at either end of Vanderbilt Avenue and implementing a whole host of shortened crosswalks, pedestrian neck downs, and bike corrals, as well as providing critical neighborhood loading zones, which will allow for local vehicle pickup and drop off activity when Vanderbilt is in its full closure open street state. Due to a whole host of, again, construction, open restaurants, some ongoing construction along the Vanderbilt Avenue corridor, we are going to just be implementing some key pedestrian infrastructure around Grand Army Plaza, and then zooming in, I'll show you where we can get the neck downs and bike corrals. Kyle, if you want to go to the next slide. Then the further slide. So first, our pedestrian unit has worked closely with residents and the community board to identify key safety improvements and crosswalk shortenings. Neck downs, as we call them, with room for additional bike corrals and bike parking. So this portion of the work will be implemented later this fall. In addition, next slide, we'll be able to add some of the bike lane reconfiguration and pedestrian islands that really helps shorten the pedestrian crosswalks at Plaza Street, the kind of southern gateway to Vanderbilt Avenue. Due to ongoing construction work along the corridor, we'll need to come back and do some of the additional neck downs and lane marking updates. But if we go to the next slide, here you can see the area where we are able to implement upgrades this fall. So at St. Mark's, we'll be adding neck downs and bike corrals. We'll also be adding them at Bergen, and an additional bike corral in between Bergen and Dean, along with the neighborhood loading zones. We go to the next slide. To remind you, neighborhood loading zones are a short term parking space that will allow for FedEx trucks, as well as local neighbor, your personal vehicle to quickly unload and be able to get goods or people to and from where they need to go without double parking. So the idea is to create these spaces along the corridor to really help support all of the ongoing delivery and drop off needs in the neighborhood while Vanderbilt is a full open street. Next slide. We are also going to be including Vanderbilt in our parking regulation pilot. This is exciting for us, for open streets, instead of the paper or laminated signs that you see up on the corridor over the past few years. We are using kind of more of the DOT language and the kind of fully regulatory metal signs and reposting those on Vanderbilt to really help clarify the parking regulations during the hours of the open street. These will be signs that while they're coming in late this season, they will be swapped on a seasonal basis. So during the cold weather months when the open street is not in effect, the regulations will go back along the corridor. And when the open street starts up again in the spring, these signs will be back again to just hopefully clarify and help allow for a better regulatory layer of the curb. Next slide. And then as we move towards Underhill, again, the concept here is for a bike boulevard, which is really a corridor where we want to strongly promote cyclist usage, slow speeds for everyone, pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles to really feel comfortable crossing and using this corridor. We see Underhill as a local neighborhood corridor, and we want to support that as much as possible through design, while also allowing for the vehicular circulation that we heard is so needed from so much of our community outreach. Next slide. Unfortunately, the Underhill Bike Boulevard does have a lot of design components, which we're not going to be able to implement this year. It includes again, like a gateway treatment on either side of the space, along with two-way cycling markings, some one-way conversions to help, again, reinforce local vehicle access, as well as mid-block traffic calming elements. So while we can't get to those this year, those will be a 2023 project, but key to us is being able to deliver kind of the traffic calming benefits at Underhill at Atlantic Avenue, which really kind of helps set the stage for the rest of the project in the spring. So if we go to the next slide, we can show you that the project this year is to expand Lowry Triangle to a fully pedestrianized space. And this will include everything from, adding movable planters and tables and chairs. The bike share station will continue, and we're working in some pedestrian neck downs along Pacific. Next slide shows you some of those toolkit items that you may recognize from our other interim spaces across the city. This will be a space that is going to be maintained by DOT's contract with the HORT as part of our public space equity program. So there will be staff on the ground that will be managing the space day to day, taking care of everything from bagging trash, wiping down and locking up movable furniture, keeping all of the planters in good condition. Go to the next slide. And wanted to get to specifically at this meeting into a little bit more detail about the impacts that we will see from the creation of this new plaza and really establishing the start of Underhill as a bike boulevard. So as we've mentioned in the past, we took a whole host of mode counts. We looked at pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles in the larger neighborhood. And what we found is that the kind of peak time, the worst case scenario, as you might imagine, is the Friday PM peak hour, which is the 5 to 6 p.m. hour slot. This is when overall the network is seeing the PM peak, people coming home from work, leaving the city, or going to destinations for Friday evening. That's also the moment when Vanderbilt is closed for the first time in the course of the week. So we really looked at that PM peak as the worst case scenario as we were modeling the overall impacts. Again, as you might imagine, kind of the biggest impact is for the southbound vehicles. We see, as many of you, I'm sure, note from being out and about and along the corridor during this time, we see congestion along Atlantic Avenue, and we see a high volume of turns from Atlantic on to Washington Avenue, and a lot of demand continuing to use Washington Avenue, as well as vehicles that are looking to continue southbound and taking Underhill. So overall, our traffic team is looking to mitigate this congestion. We will be making some signal timing changes that will really help try to manage the network for the peak demand and the peak movements that we see. At the end of the day, there still will be congestion. This is not a one-for-one. We want to be really clear that in this case, the kind of added value of public space, of being able to establish the Underhill corridor as a bike boulevard, and limiting vehicle and pedestrian conflicts with the closure of Underhill is something that we feel like is worth the congestion impacts and the kind of longer queue lengths that we see on Atlantic Avenue. Another big piece of the puzzle for us is making sure that as Washington Avenue is seeing more vehicle volumes when Vanderbilt is an open street, we want to make sure that we're adding some safety benefits to that corridor as well. So if we go to the next slide, we can see we are developing some additional neck downs again at along Washington at both Dean Street and Bergen Street, where we think it's important to, again, shorten pedestrian crossings, make sure that vehicle turns off of Washington are slowed and traffic calmed. We're also looking to see if we can fit some additional bike corrals in these spaces, since both Dean and Bergen have the crosstown bike lanes on them. Next slide. So as we look towards next steps, again, we'll be implementing some of the improvements along Vanderbilt Avenue this fall, along with the block of Underhill at the plaza, and the pedestrian safety improvements along Washington. We're gonna obviously, like all of our projects, the benefit of the paint and gravel is that we can continue to monitor the project, see how it's working, see how the overall network is adjusting, and go from there. So we certainly plan to implement the rest of the project hopefully early in 2023 to see the full benefit of both of these corridors, with the goal of continuing to work and monitor these spaces, and integrate it into the kind of larger planning of a permanent project here in the neighborhood for the future. And I think that is our last slide, right, Kyle? So we're happy to open it up to any questions, comments, concerns from the community.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Kyle. And before I open it up for Q&A, I want to also thank Lee Eastman, our DOT consult at Brooklyn Borough DOT. He's here with us tonight. And I think I saw Claudette Workman before was lurking around too, one of the assistant commissioners. But if you had Lee put his number and contact in the chat, If you have any DOT focused questions, Lee is your first point of contact. If I have any DOT that's who I contact. That's who the board contacts. So Lee is a good guy to know, and he's being very brave by putting his info in the contact. So please use him. So in the order that I see the hands, I'm going to go with Alan Gerber, Desmond, and Gibb, and then Brendan K. Alan, please hit it off. Unmute, please.
Wrong button. So question about the Vanderbilt Avenue gateway design. I noted, or is there any accommodation for how when you're heading southbound on a bicycle, the left turning movement from Vanderbilt to Grand or Plaza Street? Because that's pretty unclear right now, and I didn't see any accommodation for it in the new design.
So just so I'm clear, you're talking about bicycles
going toward Prospect Park. So you're going on Vanderbilt. And so south is left, yeah. So if you're making a left turn from southbound Vanderbilt onto Plaza Street onto the bike lane that's two-way, yeah, I guess there's not really, or like the current design, it's just kind of like figure it out, and I don't see any accommodation on the new design, and I'm just wondering if that could be accommodated.
So are you asking for like more direction for cyclists through the intersection?
Yeah, because I mean,
Yeah, I think
oftentimes when I'm doing that, I just make an invisible left turn lane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that's something we can take a look at in a bit more detail and talk with our bike folks. Something that we are upgrading for cyclists is that it's currently the northbound bike lane is just sharrows, and so we're able to actually like fully mark that lane. So we're hoping that that'll also clarify for cyclists kind of how to get on the corridor there. But thanks for that. We can see if there's any kind of additional guidance.
Desmond?
Yes, good evening, everyone. This is a really impressive project, but I have a question that has to do with, you've already alluded to the fact that there is, coming from the northern end by Atlantic Avenue, that there's a lot of turning off onto the 3 blocks, Washington, Underhill, Vanderbilt, and southbound traffic is usually pretty skewed. There is a public school off of Clausen Avenue on, I believe that's St. John's, that it has a funeral home directly across the street from it. The on the other side of that block is a fire station. Sterling. Thank you. I lose my taxes every once in a while, but I'm aware of what happens in the community. And I can tell you that from 2:30 in the afternoon through 6:30 in the evening, it's virtually impossible to navigate Washington Avenue. With the traffic calming, with the slower speeds, and with Vision Zero, with the narrowing of the roads, I have seen people desperate to get 1 block before 3 lights change, drive in the opposing traffic lane, accelerating wildly to try to get up to the next corner so they can make a turn so that they're not stuck. And I'm sure that DOT, in all its wisdom, has actually taken people into the roadway at different times and observed these phenomena, because the public school is growing. It is one of this past year, they were rated the best 3K in the city. So if there's not a bigger drawing line for families, I don't know what is. So the bicycle traffic, pedestrian traffic, vehicular traffic, funeral traffic with people double parking and parking on the sidewalk, buses, the B45 line going west, and the fire station being stuck, ambulances. There is a rehabilitation center 1 block north of the school, directly across the street from the other corner of the school. This is to say that with all of the traffic calming, the narrowing of roads, and all of the restricting of the roads to please cyclists, and I can say that at 72, I still ride my Cannondale. And I understand what it is to fight for roadway. I see a situation that is fraught with opportunities for tragedy. A lot of the younger people lack patience. That's just my observation, but I'm saying that the amount of traffic that stands still during those hours, 2:30 to 6:30, and it doesn't ease up. And with the fact that you have the closed off streets, which is a wonderful thing for the people who are enjoying them at the expense of all the people east of Washington Avenue, where traffic spills over, which I'm wondering if DOT ever took that into account. So I'm just bringing up all these issues now because this is still one community board, and all these issues have been apparent for 2 years. They've been brought up in other meetings. I have been absent from this meeting. I'm so happy that I got here today late to see the plans that are coming in, just so I could present this to DOT and all your fluid dynamics engineers who have taken all their time and all their metrics and figured out that this will work. I'm at this point, I'm just going to say I'm off, and thank you for allowing me to have a word.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Next is Mr. Vicconi.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to speak, and thanks to Emily and Kyle from DOT for making this presentation. My name is Gib Vicconi, and I am the current chair of the Prospect Heights Neighborhood Development Council, who is the local partner for Open Streets in Prospect Heights. And I know it's getting a little bit dark, but if you see behind me, you will see a yoga class in process here on Underhill Avenue as kind of an example of the types of utilization that have sprung up around these programs that have attracted a large audience both on Vanderbilt Avenue and here on Underhill Avenue as well. So we're very excited about the street design changes that are coming here that will increase safety on these streets, better facilitate this type of programming, and in general help us achieve our mission of creating a safer, more just, and sustainable neighborhood. I do appreciate the sensitivity about traffic, but I also believe that we do have to move towards strategies like this to be able to address the requirements of a more livable city with a growing population. This is a street that is local to Prospect Heights. It doesn't go anywhere else but in Prospect Heights. And it's one of the very few places where we have an opportunity to create a quiet local street. It's home to a public lower school and also a playground designed for young children. And it's been a place where we have struggled with solutions to help make it safer. But as you can see tonight, this is what's possible. This is a street that's a limited local access street, and you've seen a couple cars go by as well while the meeting has been going on. And this is all, you know, this all works within the frame of building a quiet local street in a neighborhood that's in the crux of 3 big arterial roads: Flatbush Avenue, Atlantic Avenue, and Eastern Parkway. So we're, again, delighted to see this plan move forward. I want to thank DOT and the community board for the opportunity to present these plans and discuss them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vicconi. I would add that people can add their thoughts into the chat, and I'm sure our friends at DOT will take them with them tonight. And there's a few that have been popped in there. We're going to go to Brendan K, then Peter K, Mark T, and Michael F. in that order. It's Brendan, please.
Hi. Just want to say thank you. I think this proposal looks great. I really appreciate that the community board has taken, so much feedback into account. I don't know if the board or this group is aware, but over the last couple of years, particularly since the start of COVID, there's been a lot of friction between the schools who have the playgrounds in the area and dog owners. And, you know, it's been a result of like an increase in the number of dogs in the post, you know, after COVID, and just not a lot of spaces where they're welcome. Has any thought been given to utilizing some of the extra plaza space for a small dog park?
So that's a great idea and something we can definitely take into consideration. We are working with our parks colleagues here because, you know, Lowry Triangle is parkland. Dog runs do kind of fall under the purview of the Parks Department versus DOT and our Plaza Street uses, just in terms of permitting and health codes and things like that. But again, as we look to build a permanent future vision here, I think that's definitely something we can continue to talk about and take into account. And I will say we did hear from a lot of dog owners when we were out collecting feedback on the street. So that's definitely on our radar as a need in the neighborhood.
Yeah, this is something that does come up on the Community Board 8 Parks Committee's agenda every time, every year, but it's so board wide. We really have a paucity of parks in the board. Yeah, we're adjacent to Prospect Park. Sure, there's Mount Prospect Park. Yes, but we really only have Broward in the heart of things, where a dog can be off leash. So yeah, this is something that comes up, and there's no perfect solution yet. But thank you for putting it on the table.
Thank you.
Peter, Mark, and Michael.
Yeah, thanks, DOT, and thanks, Emily, for the presentation. And I just wanted to, and Kyle, I think actually I just wanted to ask a really kind of simple question about the studies, because I think we talked about this when you presented last June, and you said they were internal DOT studies. So just wondering, I mean, if we're shooting for a sustainable and equitable and safer community, I think it would be super helpful, like if for everyone to understand what that means and how you're looking at it, if you'd be willing to share the studies that you've used and the scope of the studies, maybe just share them with the committee and with the community board, it might be helpful. And just, so I'd like to know if that's possible. I think maybe the other part of that question is to have an idea about where else in the neighborhood there are, in Prospect Heights, where there are improvements planned, rather than, you know, just in Underhill and then Vanderbilt. Because there's certainly, I'm just going to give an example. Like I know that even I think a couple weeks ago on Friday, there was a new kind of traffic jam on Bergen between, at least as I saw it, it was between Vanderbilt and Carlton, and then from Carlton down to Atlantic on Friday evening. So I'm just wondering if that's something we should anticipate in the future, is different kinds of traffic jams expanding out beyond, say, Washington, but to other areas. So I think that's why I think seeing the studies would be really helpful, because then maybe we can, if some things are being missed, we can help you locate where they are. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
There was actually a question for Emily.
Yeah, Emily, what do you?
Sure. No, happy to address that. So again, we can go back to the team and see what specific more detail we might be able to share with the committee, and get back to you. I'm not sure of the traffic issue that you mentioned on Bergen. I don't know. I mean, definitely would like to be interested if it's something that persists and continues. We certainly see, and you know, the neighborhood has been feeling the traffic impacts of the construction in the neighborhood for quite some time, and that will continue until kind of the full DEP project is complete. So we are sensitive that is ongoing. So yeah, we'll get back to the committee to share what details we might be able to from the traffic analysis.
Great.
In the small scale, that slide you had on the right-hand turn southbound off Atlantic that would be diverted by the closure of Underhill, I mean, that's good stuff to see. And I think we'd like to see more of that as a basis. But that was a good metric to give us an idea of the, what's being diverted and where it's going to go. So thank you. Mr. Thurton, then Mr. Francoeur.
Thank you, Mr. Widowax. I want to say, DOT, you guys did a lot of work, and I commend you guys on all the work that you've been doing on in that area for Prospect Heights. But the community as a whole, I mean, in reference to Vision Zero, is Vision Zero concentrated? Because every time over the past few years, the presentation from DOT has always been Vision Zero in Prospect Heights. Community Board 8 has 3 neighborhoods: Prospect Heights, Crown Heights, and Weeksville. I've never seen DOT come up with a Vision Zero for the other communities within Community Board 8, and that has been brought up several times to DOT. I mean, can DOT please address that, since we have more than yourself on the call? And also, can the concerns be sent to the commissioner that we have within Community Board 8?
Just to double down on that, I mean, we do have that Buffalo Avenue project, Mark, that they did bring to us last spring. So they are doing some work on that block between Lincoln Terrace Park and Eastern Parkway. But we've had an Eastern Parkway project ongoing for years now, and it is long overdue. And we're really frustrated with the pace of that project. It is not a public space, and I know Emily and Kyle are here with the public space people, but Lee, you're listening, and you know how we feel about this. We've also been banging the drum for years about the intersection of St. John's and Utica Avenue in general, right? We've got some issues with those blocks, and we'd love to have some addressing, some focus given to it. St. John's and the B45 bus route. We've had some discussions with DOT over the years, and nothing has come of it. So there is a mounting frustration about some of the areas that get the attention and some of the areas that don't. So hopefully, we thank you for what you're bringing us for this. I echo what Mr. Thurton said, but there's other areas that are equally, if not more, important and would require some focus. So please, any updates you have on any of those other projects, we'd like to hear it.
Yes, definitely, Mr. Widowax. Can they definitely give us some updates, because this has been going on for years. We've been asking for this for years, and DOT has spent a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of money in Prospect Heights. Vision Zero covers the entire Community Board 8, and we're asking for support for the entire Community Board 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Michael Francoeur.
Hey, yes, I'm trying to start my video and unmute at the same time. Hey, everybody. I just wanted to start off quickly just saying thanks to Kyle and Emily for the presentation. I'm really excited to see the progress on this project. I get a lot of value out of both Vanderbilt and the Underhill open streets. So really excited to see the progress there. And I honestly, I won't go too into it, because I think Mr. Vicconi said it more eloquently than I, but this is the exact of the type of project that I like to see the city engaged in, one that really helps its residents and creates a more livable, sustainable city for us all to live in. So I won't belabor that point. I had a few quick questions. One was, I noticed that you mentioned something about replacing like the metal gates, and you were talking about updates to the gateway, the north and south end of these streets. Does that mean it's going to be a different treatment? Is it going to be not the temporary metal gates? Is there going to be another I don't know, sort of barrier that's going to be blocking, or did I misunderstand that?
So as part of this particular project, we are designing neck downs, which will help shorten that space that needs to be closed with the metal French barriers, but we are embarking on a process of trying to figure out other design elements and tools that we can use to better create gateways that are both robust but more operationally friendly, and and functional and durable and all of that. So Vanderbilt is certainly one of our sites where we'll be continuing to experiment and innovate on the gateway treatment front in the coming years.
Okay, got it. Great. And on you talked about, I know you won't be able to get to everything in on Underhill and Vanderbilt, obviously, in the next year, but in 2023, is there any thought on what the road treatment will look like there? I know you had mentioned some sort of slowing, but I have noticed Underhill, when the open street is not active, it is pretty tight biking down or walking down that street with, you know, northbound and southbound cars and bikes. And yeah, something I noticed.
Yeah, so we actually have a proposal, Kyle. I don't know, we have a few appendix slides that were from our previous presentation, and we can just kind of quickly show you the.
So which slide was it again? It's on the appendix. We don't have the appendix actually, rather.
Oh, so it is the kayak slide.
1 second.
Cool. And if it's not handy, I didn't mean to derail things.
Oh no, we almost got it.
So the overall plan for Underhill, in addition to that kind of big move of making a plaza to the north, will be a series of what we're calling the kayak or canoe, which is a mid-block element that helps with traffic calming, creates a place where pedestrians can feel comfortable to kind of informally cross mid-block. We will have no parking on either side. So there's like a little bit of a chicane there for the vehicles. And then we reinforce the bike boulevard with those greenback sharrow elements. In addition to you know, some neck downs where feasible, where the vehicular turns are permit, and some additional planters. And then there are a few blocks along the corridor where we are converting from a two-way to a one-way, which will again, we're kind of keeping the southbound movement through, but we feel that that will really help again reinforce that you know, a kind of non-through for the northbound, reinforce local vehicle traffic, but it will still allow for the kind of parking and curbside access on these blocks that we know is much needed. And on those blocks will really help guide the contraflow cyclists by having a protected green lane, as you can see here.
Oh, got it. No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sorry, I'll be really quick. If I can, one more comment. You had mentioned gosh, you called them neck downs, the curbside extensions that you're considering putting in, I think, in several locations, but also on Washington as an additional like traffic safety measure, given the expected increase in traffic down Washington. And I want to say I you know, that's great to see. One thing I do see frequently though is sometimes vehicles will park in those sections. I think they add a lot of value, not just as like shortening the crosswalk, but also like daylighting. So I know you tossed out the idea of putting in something like bike corrals there, and I think bike corrals are a great option, not just because they add value for bike parking, but honestly, more importantly, it just prevents that space from being parked in and keeps it as an open corridor as a pedestrian or a cyclist being able to see around the corner. So just wanted to +1 that as a possibility. And if you're considering other things like planters in those neck downs. I can't remember, I think it was to Desmond's point about, you know, concerns about Washington seeing additional traffic, because, you know, I do agree. You know, I I do get concerned about the traffic that I see on Washington. It can get a little hairy. And one thing that I notice all the time that seems to snarl traffic on Washington is double parking, in like especially in the bike lanes on the right and left. So was if you guys are considering ways of improving that corridor and making sure that the traffic moves, I'd highly recommend. I don't know if you guys have any treatments that you've used successfully to kind of work on preventing that double parking. I know you guys are piloting different materials to kind of create lanes that can help prevent double parking. I think that would be a really great value add to Washington and help with some things. So with that, I'll stop.
Thank you. All good questions, good points. I'm going to add two more to the mix, and then we'll call this section done, both of which come from the chat, and one of which I was keyed, I think, by Emily's reference to kayaks or canoes. So as we know, our neighborhood has a bit of a problem with drainage. And hopefully these kayaks won't ever be used for actual flotation in the event of a flood, but it's good to know they're there. Are there any elements of permeability, rainwater management, that type of elements that we can include either in this phase or in a future phase that's in the toolkit?
So any kind of drainage, grading changes, things like that would need to come with a permanent capital project. So that's definitely something to consider in the later phase and something we can look at.
Great. And the second question that was raised in the chat is that, and this is an unfortunate consequence with open restaurants, but this also preceded open restaurants, rats, right? And the prevalence of our four-legged furry friends who don't want to go to dog runs. Is there any elements to either this project on Underhill or the one on Vanderbilt that will address better than we're doing perhaps currently, sanitation, the presence of rats, et cetera, et cetera?
Great question. Rats are quite the challenge, kind of all over the city for us. Certainly good sanitation is key to rat management. So our team and DOT's partnership with the Hort, we do have, in addition to sanitation services, we do have rat abatement services, but as long as there is food, the rats will be there. So a huge part of the picture is just trash management, both commercial and residential waste. I think it's something we definitely want to continue talking about with PHNDC and the larger community. Sanitation and DOT have a series of clean curb pilots that look at containerized waste. Which can be a helpful piece of rat management, but definitely an ongoing challenge for sure.
We'd welcome those containerized bins in Prospect Heights and Community Board 8 with open arms, if our arms were big enough to grab the whole bin. Anyway, I think that's enough questions on you guys for tonight. Thank you. You've been at this for almost an hour, so thank you always for your time. We'll record the chat. We'll send you if there's anything that pops in later. Thank you, DOT, for your presentation. We look forward to seeing the rollout of what's coming in the fall, and then we'll wait to hear from you guys about timing in the spring. So thank you very much. The committee still has a few items of business, and I welcome those of you who have come to hear the DOT presentation. Please stick around if you want. This is an open meeting. Everyone is welcome and invited. I'm just going to go through the roll one more time just to see who is here. Desmond Atkins is here. Is Julia Boyd here? Janet Collins. Ellen Gerber is here. Karen Gray.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Saskia Hagens is here. Jeannie Harris-Blenman here. Colin Jakubczyk here. Jennifer Jordan here. Zursima Jordan here. Regina Kinsey I saw is here. Peter Crashes. Francis Langley. Is Fiora Ortiz-Joyner here?
Julia Boyd.
Oh, Miss Boyd, I got you. Thank you. Good to hear your voice.
Okay.
Fiora Ortiz-Joyner.
Here.
Thank you, Fiora. And Irsa Weatherspoon. Ever Young. We only had 3 absences. That's fantastic. So we have a 22-member committee. We meet once a month in 6 times with a few sort of elastic meetings that we could have. We're going to meet again in October, and then we're probably not going to meet again until January. Since we fall so late in the month, we've historically found that our last week of November meeting gets boxed out by Thanksgiving, and our last week of December meeting gets boxed out by Christmas, New Year's, and the December holidays. So we're going to meet again in October, then in January, February, and we'll figure out where we go from there. For those, again, who are new this year, I'm going to try and share a document. See if this actually comes through. Is that visible to everybody or anybody? These are the goals that we voted on at the end of last board year for this year. And you'll notice they're in 4 categories, looking down the left-hand column: environment, sanitation, streets, and transit. So far we've talked almost exclusively about streets, right? But I want the committee and the members of the public to know that we have a larger agenda than that. We are here to talk about the environment. We're here to talk about sanitation. We are here to talk about transit. So the next category over, the one called category, is our list. These aren't ranked. These are just 3 or 4 areas within each of those 4 areas that we really wanted to spend our board year talking about and concentrating on this year. Under environment, air traffic noise, rats and pest control, sewers and catch basins, and the concept of a noise camera. Under sanitation, composting, containerized waste. It's come up 3 or 4 times already tonight. Public waste bins. The Department of Sanitation has gone through a phase where they take them away, they put them back, they take them away, they move them around. We think we would like some more additional cans. Streets, aside from the things that come to us from DOT, for which we are grateful, these projects, we do have a few that we are starting to talk about. I mentioned a few that we've historically talked about before. St. John's and Utica, that intersection that is unsafe and a clog for the Utica Avenue buses and the St. John's buses. But there are other, there is going to be a visioning project that is being, I believe, and others can correct me if I'm wrong, really sponsored by the city council members, Crystal Hudson, Chiosei, who want to rethink Atlantic Avenue. That is a project we are definitely going to be involved in. And then a few other categories that we want to talk about. The concept of residential parking permits, alternate side parking. A lot of people in this community over the last 3 or 4 years, those two kind of go together because cars have proliferated and parking spaces have not. And there's attention as to how we manage our streets for the privilege of residential parking and what are some ways that we could refine and improve that system. Enforcement, not only of parking, but also of traffic rules. I mean, to the point about double parking, right? That is, one person double parks and the next 30 cars have a problem. It is the ultimate in selfishness. And then transit. We are, in theory, going to be seeing a revision of the bus map rollout this year, possibly next year. But we have numerous bus lines that serve this community, and almost none of them are at the level of service that we'd like them to be. And where we can identify and advocate for improvements, we want to do so. And then the notion of bus rapid transit, we have an SBS bus that runs up Utica, Nostrand and Rogers, and we have others on Utica. Are they doing what we need them to do? We need to communicate our feelings to the MTA, right? So then the next 4 columns are just areas that we could point leverage on. The point that I bring this to the committee's attention is we're going to be breaking ourselves up into subcommittees this year, into these 4 subcommittees. You don't have to choose one. You can be on all 4 if you want. But what I'm going to do after this meeting in the next week or so, when I send the minutes out, is I'm going to ask the members to respond to me and tell me which of these subcommittees they'd like to participate in. So when we are not in full board session, the presumption is we will be having subcommittee meetings to talk about how we can find concrete, not abstract, not just talk, but do ways to bring these issues either to the attention of our elected and appointed officials, or just move the ball forward on some level, right? What can we do as community volunteers to achieve real goals, real advancement for our community? So that is how we're going to go after this meeting. We're going to break up into these subcommittees, and maybe in October we'll actually roll them out and have a more concrete schedule than we did last year for the expectations of meeting. And we will see how that rolls this year. I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually see who I'm talking to. Question. Oh, yeah, Ms. Stern, I do see that you're present. Is the cancellation of meetings a unilateral decision? It is a decision made by me, the chair, with the board office's consultation and with Mr. Thurton's consultation. Oh, our co-chair, Mark Thurton. It is a tradition I've carried over from the days of Dr. Fred Monderson. It's just the way this committee has always done. There is no reason we couldn't have a meeting. It's just we've not felt it necessary to meet. I find meetings to be less useful than the work that happens between meetings. I find that meetings are just a chance to talk and be heard, not necessarily to listen. So I think the work between meetings is more important. But that is just me. A few other issues that didn't pop up on that list that have come up over the summer, and I want to just mention them. Mr. Charles East was with us earlier. I don't know if Mr. East is still with us an hour later. Mr. Charles East runs the tennis program in Lincoln Terrace Park. Good evening, Mr. East. Nice to see you, hear you. Congratulations again on the good press that your organization got during the US Open tennis tournament. The New York Times article, for those who didn't see it. But one of our projects that we discussed with DOT last spring was a few changes they wanted to make to the block of Buffalo Avenue that basically bisects Lincoln Terrace Park. It's of special concern to Mr. East and his program because the tennis courts are on both sides of Buffalo Avenue, and there's a lot of mid-block pedestrian crossing. I'm sorry, did you say something? Sorry, I thought I heard Mr. East.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
So,
oh, good. We have the following activities at Lincoln Terrace Park. We have tennis, we have the children playground, we have basketball, we have cricket, netball. In addition to that, we just have some new barbecue pits that are open during the summer. And they're working on phase 2 and 3, which is to put in the benches. And also, we have a new supermarket we just opened. In other words, the traffic is almost doubled around Lincoln Terrace Park. And what we had asked DOT for are the following: to put where Rockaway Parkway meets East New York Avenue on the other side of Avenue. We asked them to put a flashing light which says slow down, because coming up the hill from Rockaway Parkway, a lot of people cannot negotiate the corner to go up Buffalo Avenue, especially during the winter when the road is very slippery. And you have a lot of accidents. You know, the traffic coming up the hill goes on the other side. And you can literally stand there and see accident happens. In addition to that, I mentioned the activities that goes on. We requested a traffic light to be in the middle of the block with permanent, green light, and you use the button to press when you want to cross the street. And we were totally ignored by the DOT. In addition to that, they have just implemented, they changed up all the bike lanes are, and I was speaking to the construction crew, and they are in agreement with me that the double lines next to the, they moved the bicycle lanes from the the traffic, it was next to the traffic up and down Eastern Parkway and put it next to the curb. They also have a double line between the parking where the cars can park and the bike lanes. We think that those double lines should be on the other side of the park lanes, because if you open your car, if you park and you open your car door, you're going to get hit by the oncoming traffic, by the traffic going up and down Buffalo. And they said it's a bad idea. So I asked them whose design was that, and they said the gentleman isn't there with the parks with the DOT anymore, and they were just instructed to go ahead to do their job. So in other words, I don't think we are well served in the community, especially by the DOT.
So they didn't take the mid-block crosswalk idea and incorporate it into the project?
They didn't do that. They did their own, literally do their own thing. We even request speed bump, just to slow the traffic down. And they said because it's the traffic is so heavy, they cannot do it. I've seen on some place on Linden Boulevard where they put those bumps. So they're saying it's not good because of the community, and in other community they do it. So there's some form of inconsistencies there with how they handle situations like that.
So I will take these and we'll reach out to, it's certainly your first two are very reasonable. I know that at the Rockaway Parkway and East New York Avenue intersection, they were talking about some signage and some treatments of that. We can certainly talk to them about that. The mid-block crosswalk idea, I know we discussed that with the public, with the design people last spring. And then the question about the protected bike lane, right? It's one of those that can go either way. But we will talk to the aforementioned Lee Eastman and see if we can get some answers as to why those elements were not in the project or are in the project. Okay, and we'll circle back to you by next month.
All right. Okay. Great.
Thank you, Mr.
All right,
East.
thank you so much, and thanks for the time. Thanks for giving me the time.
No, always a pleasure. Thanks for sticking around.
Mr. Whitworth,
Okay,
Mr. East,
Mr. Thurton.
Mr. East.
Yes.
Stay
Yes.
1 second. Mr. Whitworth, this is the problem that we're having with DOT. DOT is not concerned with the entire community board. This issue has been brought up to DOT for years about what Mr. East was talking about. The problem, DOT came to us, well, I'm not sure what month it was. May.
It was April or May, I can't remember.
Yeah, they presented this plan to put that bike lane in, and they said it was going to take 2 years. They went and put the bike lane in over the summer, and they did not address the walk, don't walk issue that they have on that intersection. So quite obviously, DOT is not concerned about the Vision Zero of all the community board. They are more concerned about getting this traffic flowing with those bike people over there. I have no problems with that. But this intersection has been a concern for the community for years, and DOT has neglected it and then really just put that concern on the back burner and put this bike lane in before anything else. And this plan was presented by DOT in 2017. It's a total disgrace what they're doing to the community board, and this needs to be addressed to the commissioner. This is a total disgrace.
And I'm going to add to say that it's make a bad situation worse. That's how we feel in the community. They make a bad situation worse. The way they did those bike lanes.
Right, loud and clear. We will relay that to Mr. Eastman and up the chain to the DOT commissioner at Brooklyn Borough Hall. We had a few other items come in over the summer. Complaints and comments about Access-a-Ride. If you have anything you want to bring, please email the board office or call the board office, and we want to collect evidence, if you will, stories about service level of Access-a-Ride, because we need to be writing to our elected officials about giving that more funding. We've talked about containerized waste. I pulled up the city bike expansion map. Here, and I pulled it up because we can see Lincoln Terrace Park down for those who aren't as familiar with it as other members might be. But this is also the rollout for City Bike expansion. As of, I think I just noticed today on the City Bike app, all of these stations are there, but they're offline. So I don't have a timing for when the stations are going to be put in place. And I know certain committee members and community members have relayed independent concerns to DOT about the siting of one or more particular stations. Keep those coming, right? If there's a station that you see on this map that you think is not going to work, and you've got some good evidence as to why you think it's not going to work, send it to the community board office. We will pass that on to DOT. I will be honest with you. What will probably happen is the station will get implemented. DOT will watch it. And if your fears prove founded, then we have a kind of a game of I told you so. Is that the best way to do it? Probably not, but it's one way to do it, right? But ultimately, these stations are not in poured concrete. They can be picked up and moved, shifted from a sidewalk to a roadbed, shifted from one corner to another. Let it go into place, and let's see how it goes. There's only one on this list that I look at it and I'm like, they're insane. What are they thinking? Sterling in New York, but everything else is, I can see the logic for or against. And one of the missing pieces of the puzzle is that we don't have the map for CB9 yet. There is a draft map which was circulated last spring, but we don't have, CB9 is not rolling out in this first, it's CB3, CB16, and CB8 are getting their expansions this year. CB9 is not calendared to do so. So a lot of our subway stations along Eastern Parkway, Utica Avenue most prominently, it looks like there aren't any city bike stations planned for Utica Avenue. That's not so. They're down on the other side of Eastern Parkway, but they're not coming in this rollout. It's a little silly, but it is what it is. The other thing I just wanted to mention, the last thing is we are the Environment Committee. Water, runoff water, drainage water, sewer water. When we get a good storm like we did the last couple of weeks, we had one or two. And I don't know about you guys, but my basement is a little moister than it should be after that. And I know we've got a lot of sewer enlargement and implementation projects in the district. There's one on Vanderbilt and Park, and there's one coming on Dean and Vanderbilt. There are probably more that are going to be coming down the pike. And those are all good things in the long run, but there's something that we need to manage and watch as a community in the short term to make sure that we don't live with giant holes in the ground. So if you have a block that has a flooding problem where water comes into the house, tell the community board. Tell us. This is not a DOT issue. We'll pass it on to different people who aren't nearly as responsive as DOT, but we need to get your story told. So if you are on a block, and we've had some emails today from Butler Place, if you are on a block that has this happen, tell us, and we will tell your story to the right people, and hopefully in the next year or so, get some concrete action to address those problems. I'm going to stop the share so I can see the screen again. Ms. Gray, you'd like DOT to be aware that at Washington Avenue, they're talking about bus services and school buses. Yes. And National Grid has a project on Prospect Place, and they've left some of the spots in front of the street open. Again, if you see hazardous construction site maintenance, tell the board office. They know who to hand it off to. Any other questions or comments from the committee members or community members? I see a hand.
Yes.
Mr. Atkins, yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, so you brought up several points, so I'm going to try to do it by memory. The last point that you just made about water runoff, it was my understanding that the projects that are happening across Vanderbilt are in reaction to the major construction of Pacific Park. I don't remember when it was, but it was discussed that, well, first of all, that's largely a DEP project, a capital project. And the major lie behind what's happening in New York City is the fact that New York City did not bifurcate its waste lines. They're supposed to be waste lines that are for residential runoff and waste lines for catch basin runoff. And what happens is when these storms happen is that the water is coming from both places. And because there are so many brownstones in this community that are 30 and 40, maybe even 50, 60 feet tall, the water that is coming off of roofs is having a vertical drop. And so that mass and that acceleration of water hitting sewage lines causes major damage. That's one of the things that happens. A lot of the damage that's happening in cellars is not necessarily from catch basins. It's happening from the acceleration of roof runoff. That's one thing. And so that's not always a DOT problem, though they don't work well with DEP. I had a problem with a major sinkhole in the community. Now, going along with the environment, there was a major power outage about a month ago, I guess now, and it happened on Bergen Street. It ran for long city blocks. Uh, Con Ed came in, and it just happened that they were sitting that where they were their trunk lines underground were sitting next to two major points where there were sinkholes. One of them I sent to you and made you very aware of. That was by the Brooklyn Children's Museum, which is a national institution. It's the first children's museum in the entire United States. That sat there from March, the end of March, until 3 weeks ago. Around the corner from there, they were alerted a month prior to that. That sat there until the same time. I was able to finally get in touch with people at DEP, and they were very helpful. This is after speaking to sanitation, DOT, uh, the city council, and the community board. So the point that you keep hammering is saying that we're supposed to be able to take our complaints to these very able and the people responsible for mitigating these problems, and their level of action or their intensity of action doesn't always meet what is necessary for the safe, livable communities that Gib and you, everyone else is speaking about. Mark's point is very well taken that there's a preponderance of work happening on the western end of the district. But that's not to say that certain things, central Brooklyn has been largely overlooked as far as infrastructure. And that's a city problem and a cash flow problem. And that's something that a united group might be able to affect more beneficially for everyone in CB8. As far as traffic problems, I pointed out 4 years ago that DOT would go to CB3 to CB9, get all their ducks in a row, and then come to CB8 and say, this is the way it's going to be. And we would say, well, no, it's not going to work out like that. And they'd say, well, we're already doing this in the other places and you're just the intermediary. So tough, lump it and like it. And that doesn't really work. And I'm going to come back to the point that southbound traffic through the district, since the open streets happened, was pointed out by Tamika Gibbs, who is very aware of the traffic on Franklin Avenue and the other avenues in that area, that it is constantly slammed. I, as a grandparent, have watched, and a parent of children attending 316, see the kind of traffic that happens. And it's not just that school. There's another small school in an old factory building around the corner from there, and the district office. All these things are cumulative. And a lot of things, as Mark has said, are being dealt with. They are remediating things on the western end of the district and making it wonderful. But what's happening is that
Right.
they are shifting problems over to the eastern end of the district. And Mark's, I felt his anxiety. It's that
Right.
there's really no major force. A moment ago when you spoke, and I don't know if it was a Freudian slip or what, but you said things are great in Prospect Heights and CB8. In your mind, Prospect, and you're the chair, Prospect Heights comes first. But that was the way you spoke, and that's all that I'm doing is pointing out your choice of language. I've sat in a housing meeting and said that even though I'm an advocate for my block, when I took my oath, I said that I would work for the entire CB8. And that's why I'm speaking so harshly now. There are things that need to be noted. That problem on Rochester Avenue by the tennis, that's been there for decades. I'm an old man. You know how old I am. I've seen these things for forever. The article about the tennis courts, while it may have been performative, it wasn't very kind to that end of the community. And I brought it up to someone else, and I just mentioned the article, and they exploded. They said the article was horrible. It painted a very bad picture for the community. And these are the things that color the perception and legislation about how things come into the community. I always go back to a classic movie. It's Chinatown. And a lot of people have never even seen it. But the one point that they made was that anything can happen in Chinatown. And what's happening on the western end, on the eastern end of the district, basically always paints that picture in my mind. And I can only depend on the leadership of the people in this district to help balance that out.
Right.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Atkins.
That's
You can
good.
depend on me, and I think Mark and everyone else who's known me for years can agree with this, on an equitable leadership for the transportation, environmental, sanitation, and transit needs of this entire community. I think my record shows that. You know, I
Right.
hear you. I hear what you're saying. And yeah, it's an unfortunate fact,
Right.
but it is a fact that the open streets bonanza is raining down on Prospect Heights and not on Crown Heights or Weeksville. There's a number of factors for that, and a lot of them fall on the shoulders of those who run the community organizations that sponsor those and work with DOT and have been
Right.
very vigorous in their engagement of DOT.
Mm-hmm.
It's a new and sexy project, right? Open Streets is the next new thing. I'm much more focused, and I think you know this, on safety, on equity, and on the built infrastructure, on what's going to be around in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Open Streets will either be here or it won't. It doesn't take up a huge amount of my time. It takes up an unfortunate amount of this committee's meeting time, which is why I think our value as a group of people who are concerned about the entire board. When I spoke, I deliberately was going from the small to the large, from Prospect Heights to Community Board 8. So it was not a Freudian slip, it was deliberate.
Well,
when we talk about all of these issues, and if you look back at that spreadsheet, right, those are issues that hit across the district. Service by sanitation is crappy in the west and the east. Our streets are falling apart on the west and the east and everywhere in between. The Eastern Parkway project, Mark knows how mad that makes me, that has not been completed yet. God knows how many decades after it was first hatched. And I hear you on Buffalo Avenue and on the Lincoln Terrace items. But these are the unsexy things. These are the things that don't get the press and don't get the community members to come out to the committee and listen to the DOT's snappy PowerPoint presentations, right? These are the things that require us, people like us, to do the hard work, to make the phone calls, to send the emails, just like you do, Desmond, just like you do, Mr. Atkins, to everybody and remind them, shine the spotlight and say, don't forget about this. That's our job. Don't forget about X. Don't forget about Y. Don't forget about Z. And find, it doesn't have to be the next new thing. I'm very excited about containerized waste. I think that will be something that will change the way this city works if we do it right. So if it seems like our focus is pulled to certain sexy projects and certain areas of the district, keep reminding us, and we need to be reminded to be ecumenical about this whole thing, right? So thank you. Points well taken. And I think we can go forward together on that. It is nigh on 8 o'clock. I do notice that the attendance at this Zoom has dwindled a bit. WebEx has dwindled a bit. So Are there any final points, any final comments to be made this evening?
Yes. This is Charles East again. Can you hear
Thank you,
me?
Mr. East. Yes, yes, we can.
Let me ask you, the comfort station at Lincoln Terrace, does it fall under environment?
No, that would be in the Parks Department.
All right, okay, all right. That project, the money's sitting there for over 7 years now, and nothing has been done. So I just want to brought that up.
That was an earmark from your council member, correct?
All right, yes, Darlene Mealy, years ago.
Yeah, I'd start with her office, remind her that she's got that, but also let the board office know.
All right, okay. That's it for
The
me.
money's been allocated. I remember when that project was rolled out. Yeah, so that's probably just an inter-parks contractual thing. I see Mr. Thurton's hand.
My hand was up first.
Sorry, Mr. Atkins. Mark, your call.
What action items or what action plan are we looking to do in reference to this Mr. East concerns that's been going on for years?
Mark, why don't you and I talk about that with the board office this week?
Okay.
Can I get involved in that conversation too?
Absolutely.
Am I permitted?
Absolutely.
All right, okay. Thanks.
Mr. Atkins.
Piggybacking, or actually the same issue. St. John's Recreation Center had the same issues as far as completion of comfort stations. And it's a lot of sign-offs that have to happen. You have to have environmental stuff done to make sure that there are no unsightly toxins in the soil. You have to get everything cleared up for water and electrical lines. And then the one thing that you did hit on was the fact that Miss Mealy had been in and out and back into office. And the question is that the ball basically dropped there. But that would be on the Department of Parks. And Parks isn't necessarily proactive with this community also.
Yeah, they treat our community very, very bad.
And well, you know, Mr. East, you are a community leader. You are a person who's put your life's blood into that tennis association. So from your lips to God's ears, I'm just an innocent bystander. But I know of other things that have occurred with St. John's Recreation Center that were abhorrent. And it took the previous council person to basically jump on their back and demand that they come bring things to completion and fruition. So
they have a terrible bidding. They're among the worst with bidding out projects. They'll hire. It's nonsensical. So yeah, we can help you exert some leverage on that. Mr. Atkins' points are well taken. We've been down this road before. I've not been on the Parks Committee for some years, but I remember the start of that whole stuff. Any other comments from the membership or from our invited guests? If you are a sitting community board member, you just tell the board office you want to join this committee. You're welcome to. If you are a community member, we have to keep ratios of community board members and community members. There always have to be one more of the community board members than just community members. But if you would like to talk about joining this committee and having a vote on our items, let me know. Reach out to me offline through the board office and we'll talk about that. But if there are no other items to add to our agenda, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn for the evening.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Any objections? Hearing none, I want to thank everyone for a very productive hour and a half, and we'll see you in October. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Good night.
Good night.